What is up, hobby friends? My name is Casey, and this is eBay Miniature Rescues. Today, I'm going to paint 2,000 points of Stormcast. Let's get to it. So I've been trying to figure out a good way to paint a lot more miniatures on the channel. A couple weeks ago, I painted up a Stormcast Castigore in a concept theme, and decided that this was the perfect way to get a lot more models painted in one sitting. Over the last month or so, I've been buying up a ton of Stormcast models, specifically for this project. I've gotten some really insane deals, and managed to put together a 2,000 point army for a little over 200 bucks. Let's check out the list of models. 25 Judicators, 10 Liberators, 5 with hammers, 5 with swords, 10 Sequitors, 10 Castigores, a Lord Arcanum, and a Drakesworn Templar. Everything put together is 2,260 points, but taking away 5 Judicators puts this list at exactly 2,000. Either way, it's a very good place to be for getting an army going. There's also a little bit of synergy going on with the Castigores and Lord Arcanum, and getting an extra spell with the Sacrosanct Chamber. Honestly, I have no idea if this army is the most viable for playing in a tournament or something like that, but there are some really cool models in here, and you can go a lot of directions by swapping a few models out here and there. Which, isn't that the fun of it anyways? I think so. Alright, let's get to the plan and figure out how to paint this army as quickly as possible. The colors are pretty straightforward. We're going to rely heavily on the Stonecast concept, using a black undercoat followed by Eshin Grey, Dawnstone, and Administratum Grey. Agrax Earthshade and Athonian Camoshade will bring out our color variation and give a little more life to the stone. And finally, magic blue and white for all of the magical effects. The last video I did about concept armies was a great start to this plan, and I got some really amazing feedback from you guys about how to improve that model. I've gone with a different approach for the moss this time, and I think the idea is more solid than ever. If you haven't seen that other video, check it out right here. Having a good plan will help get this army done as quickly as possible and maintain a good sense of cohesiveness between all of the models. It's really important when starting a large project like this to come up with a game plan. There are a ton of models, and even though it might not seem like it, not a ton of time. So let's get to it and start getting stuck into this massive project. I started by basing the entire army with beach sand and rocks. Nothing too crazy because a lot of it will be covered up by moss. Some of the larger rocks will be showing, and that will help sell the idea that these guys have been sitting dormant for a very long time. I used regular PVA glue and spread that around on a bunch of bases all at once. Then spread it around with an old brush and dipped all of them into a tub of sand. I tried to shake off each base lightly so there would be some larger rocks still on top of the sand. And in order to secure those rocks, I took my PVA mix of water and PVA, kind of 50-50, and dripped that on top of the sand. This added to the drying time, but it really locks in the sand and the larger rocks, so it's definitely worth it. After everything was dry, I primed everything using Stynylrez Black Primer. Now everything is locked in and ready to go. The first color I'm going to grab is Eshin Grey. This will be a pretty heavy dry brush, sometimes a little bit wet. but the idea is to cover up almost all of the black primer, only leaving that color in the deepest recesses. The good news is, if we do need to touch up the black for any reason, Stynores can be brushed on, so there was really no reason to go over the models with any other black. Moving on to a bigger guy. I did a little bit of work on this. I put quite a bit of texture into this model, a lot of kind of rock and dirt texture. I also continued that along the base. I thought that kind of tied everything together. So this guy looks pretty cool. And I also filled the underside of this stomach with dirt texture because this particular model is awful. The sculpt is terrible on the underside. I don't know why they made it that way, but it's covered up, so I think someone will appreciate that. Well, this is where we're at. It's not been very long, surprisingly, I guess. And I finished all of the Eshin Grey. So now we're going to move on to Dawnstone, do pretty much the same thing, and see how it goes. Now, the nice thing about just painting for an entire marathon of 24 hours or beyond or whatever it is, I get to listen to a lot of good music and podcasts. If you didn't know, Brent from Goobertown Hobbies and myself do a podcast called Paint Bravely. I've been listening to the newest episode to make sure it actually is functioning properly, and a new one should be out tomorrow morning. You should check it out. Brent and I have a ton of fun doing the podcast. Mostly, it's just us chatting about different aspects of the hobby and trying to shed some light on why we do the things that we do. Moving into Dawnstone. This will be the same dry brushing process to the Eshin Grey I just did. I just want to cover a majority of the models with this lighter gray, really to start picking out the details. This will bring in an overall brightness and give us our first major highlight all over. Then I'm going to go directly to Administratum Grey and give the final highlight to the stone. This is a selective process mainly focusing on the upper half of each model. This will bring out the brightness in the face, shoulders, and weapons, and balance out the base once we get some color on those. So this is how far we are in so far, feeling pretty good. I've got a good majority of the army underway. I still have probably half of the models to wash, and then got to do a little bit more dry brushing to bring out those highlights again. And then we start putting on some moss. Now, the real worry that I have right now is how long it's going to take to dry. I'm going to put the glue on. I've got some ideas for the moss to make it a little more scale friendly. And we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't take too long because, yeah, it's getting late. Alright, let's get back to it. Worries about the moss aside, I'm using Agrax Earthshade and Athonian Camoshade randomly on each model. That way the colors blend and we get a nice earthy color for each model. The great thing about doing an assembly line of so many models is that by the time I'm washing the last model, The first one is already dry and ready for the next step. The wash is going to darken down the models a little bit, so I'm going to have to come back in with Administratum Grey to refresh some of those highlights that we lost. It's possible I could have done the wash and then come back in with the lighter gray, but overall doing a quick top-down dry brush in select areas of each model wasn't really that time consuming. There's still plenty of time left on the clock. Now that the dry brushing and washing is all done and dried, it's time to add the magic bits to each model. I take everything over to my airbrush booth and start with Magic Blue from Vallejo. I carefully went over each model, trying to keep a similar look for all of the magic. The helmet's got a nice spray across the eyes, weapons got a gradient from about halfway up the handles to the end, and any kind of pendant or scroll was filled in with blue. After the blue was applied, I came in with Liquitex white ink, and I got real close. Trying to make the blue look like it's glowing is as easy as coming in really tight with white and getting it directly in the center of anything that's blue. For the weapons, I gave them a gradient from blue to white at the tips. This really pushes that magic for each model and makes them look really cool standing all together on the table.
Drown slowly with her in command. Beautiful ships sing quietly as you helplessly stand. Watch her as she takes hold of your lips and your tongue. The kiss of kindness is never in anyone's eyes wrong.
This is where we are right now. It's a lot of hours. And I'm pretty tired, but still feeling pretty good. Got pretty much everything done, except for all the basing and the brush detail work. So that's what we're going to get into next. We're going to do all the basing for everything, start to get the moss on. I've got this mix I'm going to try. We're going to see how that goes and hopefully finish this thing up even before the 24-hour mark. That would be pretty cool. Let's do it. Last time I did Stormcast on this channel, one of the biggest suggestions I got in the comments was to find a basing material that looked more like scale moss rather than the large-scale deer moss that I was using. There were a couple of options I had to choose from out of my basing collection, and I ended up going with a really short static grass from a company called Evemodel. It happened to be the color that I was after, and it laid down a lot like moss that I've seen before on real stones. In order to break up the color a little more, I added some little bits of foreground scrim foliage, which has a bunch of little flowery looking shapes in a net that fall off really easily. I've used them before and it works great when blended with other grasses. This was by far the most time consuming part of this project. Possibly because the sun was coming up and I was really feeling the time, but also because it had to be laid down, mixed, and gone over in order to make it look like the type of moss I was after. I also threw in some deer moss pieces to break up the scale, and some army painter grass tufts to bring in even more contrasting colors into the moss. In the end, I am extremely happy with how the basing turned out. This is truly what I was after. in the first place. And I love the way that the bright colors bring the whole army together, and they just have this cohesiveness on the table.
You bow and say thank you to the mistress of me. For your Sophies and
Alright, so after I started basing, that actually took quite a long time, and I was really starting to run out of energy there. It got kind of boring. Glue, flock, glue, flock. So this is where we're at now. A little over 10 hours left. That's not bad. I still have to do all the detail work with the brush. So hopefully I can manage to continue to do that and not screw it up. I probably should have done the detail work before the basic, but they look so cool right now, and I feel like they're almost done, so that's going to give me probably just enough to get over that final ledge and finish this army. The final step was to bring everything together with detail brushing. The aim is to bring attention to the most important pieces and brighten up any of the airbrush work with some crispy white lines. I edge highlighted all of the weapons, filled in all of the eyes, punched up the glowing runes and bits on every model. It's amazing what a little bit of extra detail can do for a model. And I'm glad I took the time to do this step because the end result has me really excited. At this point, there was a little over 5 hours left on my 24-hour timer. I spent a little bit of time touching up some of the moss, adding more grass tufts to some of the models here and there, and making sure that all the details were picked out properly. Honestly, this was one of the most fun times I've ever had painting in this hobby. Staying up super late and finishing an entire 2,000 point army to a pretty good standard is not something you do every day. It makes me feel like I was a kid again, staying up all night and being excited about it. I got to spend time with something I love to do, and even though I was ready for sleep by this point, I still felt like a kid playing with toys that didn't want to go to bed yet.
Dragon! Yeah! Oh no, you wouldn't get me!
Yeah, like that. Just remember that having a good solid plan can help you accomplish much larger tasks in this hobby. Knowing what is coming up next can give you that motivation to keep going. Every time you finish one part of that plan, it really does push you to want to keep going. Even if it's just a box of models and not an entire 2,000 point army, you'll probably feel that sense of accomplishment finishing a box in a relatively short amount of time just because you had an idea of what you were doing before you even picked up a brush. Seriously, I am very proud of the army, and I genuinely hope that you like it. If you do, you'll be happy to hear that this entire army is going back up on eBay. The price will start, as always, at the price that I paid for the model, or in this case, all of them together. The support I get from selling models on eBay directly goes to funding this channel, so I can do bigger and more ridiculous projects like this one. I can't thank you all enough for that support, and I truly hope that this has brought you joy in one way or another. Thank you all for watching. Here is the finished Stormcast Eternal army. Thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you enjoyed something about this video, please like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.